That's a really interesting thing to play with. How can you be passionate about what you do, but know that at the end of the day, it's not yours?
Hmm.
And whether it's other people that derail something, or whether it's God saying, no, this is not the time, this is not the place. How can you navigate that? And that's something that it was a real help to me from an administrative point of view, but philosophically it also has made me think a lot since then about there's that saying, that, well, you're told this is God's work, not yours.
Welcome back to Ministry Reimagined. This episode was so exciting for me because I had the privilege to interview Dr. Andrea Luxton, who was the first female president for 4 different schools in 3 different countries. I won't spoil her story, but she has a really cool one. Stay tuned. How are you doing, Dr. Luxton?
Yes, good.
Do people call you Dr. Luxton? How do people usually call you?
They call me Dr. Luxton, they call me Andrea, they call me whatever they fancy. So
That's perfect. I love that. Out of my curiosity, how has life been outside since you left Andrews?
good. There's always something to do. And I moved a little bit further north into even more snow than there was in Michigan.
Wow.
But yeah, I'm engaged working with the North American division, so that's a lot of fun.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I love that. So you didn't retire, you just
I did
moved on?
retire. I
Okay.
retired, so this is a part-time retirement thing.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Oh,
Yeah.
very cool. I
Yeah.
love that. Well, I have a lot of questions for you. I did some research on you.
Okay.
There's a lot of articles.
That's always
out there.
scary.
No, not at all. There's lots of articles out there explaining your life and some of the things that you've done. And I found that you, correct me if I'm wrong, these articles might be wrong, that where you got your bachelor's in theology and education.
English.
In-
Theology
oh, right,
in English.
in English.
Yeah.
In Newbold College, that's
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Very good. How did you pick theology?
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So I grew up in England, and I always wanted to be a teacher, right? From age 4, I remember both my parents were teachers, so I wanted to be a teacher. And when I did my university entrance in England, I had to choose eventually, did I want to go the way of math or English? Because those were my 2 loves at the time. And I decided to go with English and then become an English teacher. So I started in a public university in England or in UK. And as I started there, I'd always been in an Adventist school. And it just felt a little bit hollow. And I thought, what's the difference? So I actually started thinking, well, what did my mother do as an English teacher differently to what I'm hearing now? And I thought, and that's when I realized the whole faith aspect and what a difference that made in what you do in the classroom and in teaching. And at the time, I was also really heavily involved in a little church where I was going to the university, doing everything from Pathfinders to youth leader to everything. And I just thought, maybe I should change into ministry. So I left university and went to Newbold to study theology. And I got so much credit for the English I'd done that they said, well, you might as well do a double major. So I did a double major. So that's how I ended up in theology. Because I thought for a little while there I would go into pastoral ministry. And I loved theology. But at that point in time, there was so much a ceiling on what you could do if you went into ministry in Europe. And a couple of my professors there said, Andrea, if you want to really make a difference in the church, you probably should think about teaching.
Interesting.
And so that's what I did. I swung back into the teaching route. And but the theology has always been a thread through everything ever since. So, but yeah.
Wow. Interesting. I want to know, when you think back to how you grew up, you said you grew up, your parents were in the church, right? and everything.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time when you were growing up where you steered away from it and you didn't want anything to do with the church?
You know, I would say no. I would say I was pretty convinced that that was where I wanted to go. And I think one of the reasons that was I was so actively, my parents, instead of going to some of the bigger I grew up in a smaller church too. So from very, very young, I was engaged in the church and church activity. And so I really had a lot invested in that, and felt that was very much part of who I was. So no, I actually didn't. As I was doing my studies later in later years, that was probably where more kind of questions came into my mind. But growing up, I was pretty much, this is where I'm going to go.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm curious, when that path of, I feel like it's different when your ministry becomes your career. How did those two link for you?
I think that the hint of that is back to what I was just saying about that shift that I made when I was 19. I think if I had carried on in the public university route, and I may have ended up in a different place. But I think once I got that kind of aha moment, wow, that's what's different. And I realized that what I had been given by being in an Adventist school, where that dimension of faith was engaged in every aspect of life, and I kind of, it was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to be part of that, part of giving to others the opportunities I'd had by doing that. And so once I made that decision, then ministry was definitely the route I wanted to go.
Yeah. Thinking more about the difference between the public schools and Adventist schools, you know that if you picked other public or private schools that weren't very Christian or religion-based, you would have probably gotten paid a lot more. Was that ever a factor in your choice?
You know, my parents, to say, were both teachers in the Adventist system, and so I grew up with that kind of seeing the sacrifice they were making, but also seeing the excitement and passion about what they were doing. And so I always had the feeling that as long as I had enough to have a good life, so to speak, that was okay. Why did I need the rest? And I felt the energy and passion and excitement about life that I had experienced myself, and I thought, I don't need more than that. So no, it really hasn't ever been there for me. I mean, occasionally, you know, you can't help it when my brother, who went into finance and big business, and you know, and his his Christmas bonus was more than my annual salary. Then I thought, oh, come on.
Wow, yeah.
You know, I just didn't see. But there was one moment when he said to me once, when we were laughing about the different paths we'd taken, he looked at me and he said, "But you enjoy what you do." And that is a big difference.
Yeah, wow. Going back to some of the research that I've done on your life, you weren't just president of Andrews University, you were president of Berman, what was it called before?
Canadian University College.
Canadian University. And before that, it was Newbold,
Newbold
right?
College, right, yes.
How did that process work? Did you always know you wanted to be president of these schools?
No, not at all. My goal initially when I decided I was going into teaching was to just be an English teacher at secondary school. That's what I wanted to do. And different doors kept opening up, and different times, you know, there were different doors, so it's hard to just say it in one story. But I would say that higher education administration, I was a teacher at Newbold College, and I had a number of opportunities to experience what leadership could be. And I found it really creative. And I thought, this is a great way of being able to bring greater influence to what is happening on a campus and engaging it. So, and I thought that maybe one day I would like to be an academic dean or an academic vice president.
Wow, yeah.
So, but I had no concept at that time of that I would be a president or president of 3 institutions. I'm a firm believer, though, that first of all, what God wants most from us is to use the talents He's given us, right? And secondly, I believe in opening doors and then seeing which one God seems to want me to walk through. And so that's kind of what I've done.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What kind of, you were talking about talents. What kind of talent do you think it takes, or skills it takes, to be a president of an institution? Feel free to be as not humble as you'd like.
Well, I think it's a combination of skills. I do think you have to be on the just natural skill side to be a president of any university. I think you have to be able to be strategic, analytical, visionary. You have to be creative. I think, a lot of people have said to me, when you retire, will you write a book? Why didn't you write a book on leadership? Why didn't you write a book on women in leadership? Why didn't you? And recently, through some other things I've been reading and other projects I've been engaged in, I thought, one thing that I would really like to write about is leading with the fruits of the Spirit. Because I think that beyond the capacity to just be strategic and do all of those things and know higher education, know all of this, the building of a culture on a campus of faith, but of love, peace, all of those types of attributes that come through the fruits of the Spirit, that is probably what you need most. Now, having said that, I absolutely do not claim that is me, but I think that is what you need to strive towards if you want to be effective in leadership, is to have those values that actually drive who you are and the decisions you make. Because otherwise you can make expedient decisions, or your decisions can be based on other criteria. But if you don't have the values underpinning that, I think it can push you and whatever you're leading in the wrong direction.
I think it's very fair to say that you have at least some of those skills and talents. You've done it 3 times.
3 times, yes.
That at least shows something. That
I say that the first one was my making all my mistakes time.
Yeah.
My second one was my oasis. It was just so lovely. Canada was just such a peaceful, wonderful experience. And then Andrew's was my, let's see if experience works. Yeah.
I want to talk about that. So I'm from Canada.
Oh, you are? Okay.
So that relates.
Whereabouts?
Near Toronto. So about the other side.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm just curious. It doesn't, what do you think the main difference was from Berman to Andrews?
Well, Berman is a much smaller campus. What I loved about that was I could be involved in everything. I could go to every sports game. I could go to every social activity. I could go to every music performance. And so I really felt that I knew everybody, and I was really caught to everything that was going on the campus, and I loved that. How can I say that? I don't. This is going out to more than just Canadians, but I give the Canadian. I love the Canadian culture and community, and I'd never been anywhere where you came up with an idea and people said, "Yes, let's do it." thought, what? You're not going to ask me questions. You're not going to interrogate me. You're just going to say, yes, let's do it.
Wow.
and that was my experience up there. It was just a very let's do attitude and environment. And that was just sweet. It was nice.
Wow. I love that. The Canadian me is so happy. I love that. That's funny. You were talking about being involved in everything as you were in Berman, but I've even noticed I was here. When did you leave Andrews? It was 2022, 3, somewhere around there.
2023.
3, right?
Yeah, 2023.
So that was a year after I got here, and even in a year, even before I got here, when I was a senior in high school, I would see on Instagram, especially during graduation, you had a handshake with like every single student. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, yeah. It was. That was an interesting thing. So during COVID, right, we couldn't shake hands.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, so how do I connect with the students as they're getting their diploma? And so we agreed that we would do a reciprocal, whatever they chose to do, I would do it back, right? So if they waved, I'd wave, and so we did that kind of thing. And the students were given a little video recommending, hey, these are some of the things you could do, right?
Wow.
But then they created their own. So the fun was, could I do what they did, right? Most of it was good, but a couple of them were like basketball hoops and little dances. So it was like, okay, but it was fun, and especially at such a time that was difficult, and graduations that you couldn't do what you'd normally do. It was a point of connection, and actually I really got to love it because each student, normally they come across the stage, they shake hands with you, they smile, they go, right? And it's just this way. You could see them thinking as they came across the platform what they were going to do, and could they catch me out so I couldn't do it back, right? and then they would look you straight in the eye, and it was a really good moment of connection, and I really, really liked that. That was a lot of fun. So that was one of the more fun things I was able to do here.
Wow, that's beautiful. What would you have done if they tried to make you do a backflip? Would you have tried?
I would have probably done a half backflip. I would have probably just so a couple of them did do things that I just was beyond me to do, and I would kind of do a half thing or some kind of response. But yes,
that's awesome. With that though, that, to be completely honest, and I'm aware this might ruffle something. When I was a senior in high school, looking at these videos of these really cool handshakes, I was considering Southerner Andrews, and this video alone, to give you some credit, that made me choose Andrews. That was a big part of why I chose Andrews.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
I felt that community that you were trying to build, and so with that, when you're in charge of an institution, I feel like it's very easy to just focus on the admin stuff, just like all the boring tasks, and let that consume you. But you didn't. What made you lead so relationally?
Because to me, that's the icing on the cake, right? The cake is making the university run, right? The icing on the cake and the decoration on the cake is the community you build. And that's what makes the whole thing kind of worthwhile. So before you came, when I first came to campus, I started off talking about tea time. So let me give you a little ditty here. You know the Zacchaeus story. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, right? A wee little man he climbed on for Jesus he wanted to see. When the Savior came that way, he looked into the tree and he said, Zacchaeus, you come down. And what's the next line? For I'm coming to your house today. But in England, it's not that.
What is it?
It rhymes. He looked into the tree and he said, Zacchaeus, you come down, for I'm coming to your house for tea.
Okay.
And that's because in the English culture, right, the tea is not just a cup of tea. Tea is a let's sit down together, let's engage together. It's always in the mid-afternoon, and there's some jam and some scones and some cream and some drink, and so you have this wonderful moment together. So when Jesus says to Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house to tea, it's far more, from my perspective. When I first heard today, I thought, no, you're cutting out that true meaning of community, of Jesus wanting to come to talk to Zacchaeus, to get to know him, to engage with him. Okay, so when I first came here, I started pop-up tea parties. So around the campus, we'll put out a notice that I'm having a pop-up tea party in one part of the campus or another part of the campus, and we would go there, and my assistant, we had two different kinds of tea, and we had some cookies, and I would just be there for a couple of hours, and anyone who wanted to could come along and chat, and that was tried to send a representative message of the fact that I wanted to engage, and I wanted to not just engage myself engage, but I wanted people to engage with each other. That a community is a community of strength, and particularly a community of faith, is when you're actually connecting with each other, talking with each other, valuing each other. Because I think that's what Jesus did when he went to his Zacchaeus' house, is he was valuing him. That's what shocked everybody.
Wow. That's awesome. We got to bring tea time back. I don't know why I left. That's really cool. Wow. Something else that I know, as far as Andrews, I know that you were the first woman president. Is that true for the other universities?
Yes, yeah.
Wow, all three of them?
All three of them, yeah.
That's crazy. How did that feel for you?
So my parents were very good on this. I had an older brother, and then there was me. But I never had any sense that there was something I couldn't do because I was a girl, right? And so I think that it was probably more of a shock to other people. It was a shock to me that I was a president, but it wasn't a shock to me that I was a female and a president.
Yeah, good.
Because it goes back to that, when you talk about questions on women in ministry, I think to me the big thing is back to what I said earlier. If God has given us a talent to do something, he expects us to do it, right? That's the gifts we've got. And so when someone is limited from ministry or doesn't do something because they're a woman, I actually feel very sad about that, because I think that is limiting what gifts God has given someone. And I'm not sure we should do that for anybody else. We certainly shouldn't do it for anyone else. And I hope we don't do it for ourselves either. So that bit about being a woman was... Now, having said that, does that mean other people didn't give me a hard time? No, they gave me a hard time. I've always also thought that whether it's because you're a woman or whether it's because you're a minority in another way and you're in a position, the best thing you can do is prove the validity by just doing the best job you possibly can.
That's awesome. You were talking about some of the backlash that you've gotten from other people. How did you handle that? Was it...
I think it's the kind of thing you just listen to and then just let it go. Yeah. I'll give you, I mean, and people are more subtle nowadays than maybe they used to be. So the first time I was ever a female in a leadership position was actually when I was principal of the secondary school in England. And I was the first woman as well. And I remember this story today because it made me laugh, but it represented some of the shock for people. And a lot of the problem is shock. So I was in my office, and my assistant called me through and said, I got a gentleman on the phone who'd like to speak to you because he's thinking about sending his son to the school. And I said, yeah, please put him through. So I got the phone call through, and I got a gentleman on the other end of the phone. And I said, hello, how can I help you? And he said, it was kind of quiet. And then he said, well, I want to speak to Dr. Luxton. And I said, yeah, that's me. And he says, but you can't be, you're a woman.
Oh, man.
And it was so, I just laughed. and,
Wow.
and to give him credit, when I laughed, he laughed as well because he realized what he just said.
Oh.
And but I think that is the challenge for some people. They just struggle with seeing a woman in a certain role, and because of their background, because of how they have been taught or seen things. And so my goal has always been just to be as gracious as I can and just show, yeah, a woman can lead. It's okay. Can do ministry.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I love that. I hope you know that being the first female president in now, I guess, 3 or 4 institutions, you've paved the way for women, not only in these institutions, but in institutions everywhere else, saying, you know what, I can lead because Dr. Luxton did it first. That's
Good. I hope
awesome.
so. I hope I can do that. I hope I've been able to do that.
That's incredible. We were talking about this a little bit before when we were talking about ministry and what ministry really means.
Yes.
How would you define what ministry is? Does it have to be within the church organization for it to be counted as ministry?
No, I think there's a lot of lay people who do a lot of amazing ministry and make a huge, huge impact in their communities, and that's a form of ministry. It's not full-time ministry, but it's still very, very powerful. Not everybody can be in full-time ministry in the church. That just wouldn't work anyway. But I think a ministry is, in the broad term, is just approaching. I don't think ministry is something you just do. Ministry is a way of being. I think more than anything. I am going now to a small church in Michigan called Paw Paw Church, and that is an amazing church because I see so many people there who are actively engaged in ministry in their local communities, in the places where they work. The whole church just exudes that sense of here we are to be there for and minister to others. So, yeah, I don't think people who choose not to be full-time ministers in the church should feel that they don't have a role in ministry, because they do.
That's awesome.
And really, my decisions to go into full-time ministry were really based on the fact that I was engaged in ministry in the local church from quite young.
Yeah. So it was just like a path for you to
It was a
keep going,
path for me, yeah.
What do you think could be done better from what you've seen? What do you think we're lacking?
I think that is dependent on where you are and what you're in, because I think what's lacking in one place, maybe you may find somewhere else. But I think I don't know that this is a lack, but something I've been thinking about recently is joy. Sometimes I think we are so intense about what we are doing and working so hard to get things done that sometimes we forget that ministry is joyful and that we have something to share that is actually joyful. And I think that adds a lift to ministry. And I don't hear many people talking about that. That's why I'm talking about it.
Yeah.
So I think to help people find the joy for themselves and then to share that joy in the ministry maybe is one thing that I would say universally we perhaps don't do enough of.
Yeah.
But I would say it's other than that. I think depending on where you are, I think it is. We have a very, very, very strong work ethic, and I don't want to undermine that value. That's great, but I think that means we need to be extra specially careful about looking out for each other and making sure on the personal level we give people that kind of support, and just make sure people know that they're valued.
That's big, yeah. When, in your experience, have you ever dealt with burnout, and what's the way that we can get rid of that?
Yes. So, funnily enough, I burnt out. The time time I really said I would burnt out was probably when I was a young teacher. So my first job was teaching English in secondary school in England. I was single. I shared a house with a young woman who was teaching history, and she lived upstairs, I lived downstairs. And when we weren't teaching, we had students around our house. They would just knock on the door, they just come see us. I loved it, absolutely loved it. But when I went to do my PhD after 4 years, I was burnt out. I'd given like 150%, and I didn't know my own boundaries. I set none for myself. And the reality is that people, when you're walking around with energy and excitement about what you're doing and people look at you, they may not realize that you're burning yourself out, and they may not know how to protect you. Basically, at the end of the day, you have to learn how to protect yourself and how to put boundaries on. So from then onwards, I kind of learned. So even when the high pressure was on, I would do things like this. I think if you have family, you have a little bit of a automatic let out, in the sense you need family time. When you aren't married, I had to write times into my calendar for me.
Yeah.
And the first time I did it, I felt so selfish. It was like,
yeah, wow.
How can you do that? And yet, those were the times when I found I could rejuvenate, or I would do things for myself that would give me the energy to be able to give back more. And I soon realized that no, it wasn't selfish. It was actually totally essential. If I was going to keep giving, I had to be rejuvenating. And yes, that is time with God and so on, but it's also more than that. You have to give yourself time to do other things, the things you enjoy doing, and learn what those are and what gives you most opportunity to, get back your energy and your passion. Otherwise, your passion kind of ends up dying.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Like you said, people feel like it's selfish to take that time for themselves, but that's sometimes what you need. What was your favorite way
to do that?
Yeah.
Well, if I could, I would, and this was easier in England, but I mean, here in every place you have somewhere like this. For me, when I first was exploring this, it was going down to the coast and walking along the beach or walking along the cliff top. And finding if it was nice weather, finding a bench to sit on. I had a friend who is a bird watcher, and I used to go on trips with her. She would just call me up and say, "Andrea, there's this bird. I got to go find it. Will you come with me?" So we jump in a car and go, and she would go chasing the bird. And I would go off by myself, and she would say that she could watch me out of her binoculars, and I would find this rock or something to sit on. And so she's called it mushrooming, because I had this mushroom-colored hat on, and I would just sit there on this rock, and she could see me. But, she walked about a mile, I'd still be sitting there like I hadn't moved on this rock.
Wow.
And that's what worked for me.
Yeah.
That's what worked for me.
It's a beautiful story.
It's whatever place works for you. And sometimes for people it's a place. Sometimes it's just a nook in someone's own home. Sometimes for people, there's someone I worked with who used to go to a mall and just walk the mall. Wow. Walk up and down the mall. Never buy anything, just walk up and down and up and down. That was where he rejuvenated. I didn't get that. I wouldn't do it for me, but for him, that was what worked. And it's finding what is your place and what works for you. I think that gives you that most capacity. And for some people, they have to be with other people. For me, I'm an introvert, and for me, it's alone time. Yeah. But for other people, it's a couple of great friends that they will and they know that if they go out with those friends, that's what will give them what they need.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. I feel like I'm learning more about you already. I am curious too. You've grown up in so many different places and locations, and through technology's changing. What do you feel about technology now, and like, is it and its role in the church? Do you think it's something that should be separated, or?
No, it's really important. You have to keep up with where we are, but not let that take over from you. And every time something new comes out, there's always a fear of it, and secondly, a risk of it taking over too much. And always keeping that balance of seeing technology as a tool, not as the end, the solution, right? Then I think you can get the balance. But no, if you don't keep up with technology and what is happening, you eventually become irrelevant. I still remember when internet was first coming in. That might seem very strange to you, but anyway. And they all still had the old fax machines and everything else. And I remember sitting in my office. This was when, I think probably the first year I was president at New Bowl College. And I had two doors into my office, one from the corridor hallway and one from my assistant's office. And then there was a fax machine, and email were just coming in, and at those days you hadn't yet learned how to shut off the ping every time an email came through. So I was sitting at my desk, and within a few seconds the following happened. The fax machine started going off. I got two emails coming through with a beep, my phone rang, and both doors knocked. Wow. And I thought, no,
wow,
this is just overload. So I think the risk of new things too is that you don't learn how to manage it. So you can just get overwhelmed by something that's new that's coming in. So
I like that perspective of becoming irrelevant if you don't use that. Yeah.
Yes, no, I think you can become irrelevant. All the big conversations about AI right now, I don't think you need to be threatened. No one needs to be threatened by AI, but neither do you have to be controlled by it. It helps a lot. It gives a lot of information. It brings a lot of information together. It can help you refine what you're thinking or saying, but it isn't always right.
Yeah, very true. That is very true. I'm just curious, what ways do you use AI now?
Do I use AI?
Yeah.
I use it to start a conversation. So, for example, I met with a group of professionals from different university campuses, and we were trying to put together a statement for all of our campuses, what is the Adventist education advantage, right? And groups were looking at different things. And there, one of them, we put in what AI said. And AI came up with a statement, and we wrote it up. And then we looked at it and said, oh, you know, that's pretty good. And then everyone got into it, but that word actually doesn't really capture this, or, you know. And so we actually used that as a frame to begin a conversation, to come up with something that was actually quite powerful at the end. So that's one way. I use it myself just to ask a quick question on something. I mean, let's get. So I don't have to spend hours finding this out. Let's just get it from AI and be done with it. It's not that important, but it just helps. I haven't used it that much this way, but I know people who do, who have written a letter and then put it through AI. To actually refine some of the words, particularly if it's very sensitive, and they're trying to make sure it's really saying what they want to say. And sometimes AI will come up with something better, sometimes they're not. But it's a kind of so it's more as like a reference point. So, and to get resources, find resources on such and such. Bring up resources, then you can get into the resources, look at it, and decide what you want to do with it. So basically, a tool, not the end in itself, is how I use it.
That's beautiful. I'm curious, is there a Bible verse, a book, or a quote or something that you lived by throughout, your career and education, your life now?
So one of the first passages that became meaningful to me as I was kind of late teens, early 20s, was Psalm 139. And that is one that I keep going back to. Lord, you know me, you searched me, you know where I go here, you know. It's that sense. And that is that to me has been a go-to for several reasons. First of all, it kind of puts life in perspective. God knows you better than you know yourself. And even if sometimes you want to run away from God, you can't. And sometimes you want to make your own decision, and yeah, but there's always that sense of something bigger than you that's there, that understands you. But the thing is, it's not just about holding you back or controlling who you are. It's about knowing you and therefore knowing what is best for you. So that to me is a wonderful passage. Also, I like that passage because, like a lot of the Psalms, it's a journey. And I can see the psalmist, wow, you know this, you do here, you could go there. And it's like a constant process of discovery of who God is in relation to who the psalmist is, until it gets to a point of submission at the end of the psalm. And so I think that, to me, is very powerful as well. That journey we're all on, that of discovery that never really ends. There's just, I think, points of those moments of realization where you can only submit to who God is, and it's those powerful moments. And in between those, there's those still moments of discovery and journey about knowing who God is and knowing who you are yourself. So that's why I like that one.
No, yeah, wow. Would you say that Psalms is your favorite book of the Bible?
Yes, I'd say so. Psalm 139, yes. I mean, there's lots of things I like, but that one is the one I go back to. And maybe because of my literature background too, I really like the Psalms in general, because they have a lot of depth and emotional variety, and so yeah.
With that, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten that you still remember to this day?
Best piece of advice I've ever got. So that's difficult. Well, I can think of lots of pieces of advice, so let me just give you one of them. It may not be the best one I ever got, but it was very meaningful at the time. And I think it relates to ministry as well in many ways. So when I was a young, my first leadership position then was principal of the secondary school. And I had a board, like all schools, and a very wise board chair. And I went into the board with this idea I had that was I knew just the best idea out. And they didn't buy it. And we carried on with the meeting, and I thought everything was... And he said to me afterwards, Andrea, he said, never go into a meeting or anywhere owning something that you have no right to own. Because it wasn't your decision to make. This was... And when the board chose not to go that way, your disappointment was so clear, because you had invested so much of yourself in bringing something to the table that you really wasn't yours. And that's a really interesting thing to play with. How can you be passionate about what you do, but know that at the end of the day, it's not yours? Right? And whether it's other people that derail something, or whether it's God saying, no, this is not the time, this is not the place. How can you navigate that? And that's something that it was a real help to me from an administrative point of view, but philosophically it also has made me think a lot since then about there's that saying, that, well, you're told this is God's work, not yours. What does that actually really mean? And I do think it helps you, because sometimes you see something that happens in ministry, around a church, around an institution, and you just don't get it. It just seems wrong. It just seems the wrong way to go. How do you react to that? And it doesn't mean I don't think you don't have a voice. Yes, you absolutely have a voice to say and express it. But at the end of the day, whatever goes on is beyond you. If you own it so much, it can be destructive to you. And my experience over the years has been that God has a longer look on something than we do. Often it's absolutely the right idea but the wrong time. Or there are other people that have the right to put their ideas, and right now it's their turn to explore this. And things turn and come back. One thing I do strongly believe is that God has overriding control over the church, not just our own ministry, but the church more broadly. That is why I can still have confidence, even if sometimes I look at something and I think, nah. I don't know if that makes any sense. But
no, that was incredible. You said so many gems in there that I don't want to touch it. I just want to leave it just like that, just like the way you said it, because that was gold. Some of the things you said. I was going to try and talk about it, but I'm scared I'll mess it up. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it like that. I will say, though, in Adventist institutions and universities and all that, there's lots of outlets where students can get lots of information about God, and there's chapels, there's Vespers, there's so many opportunities for information, but I feel like there aren't that many places to encounter God and what that really feels like and looks like for people. What's your experience with that? Is that something that you've noticed, or?
Yes. I think there's two things that cause that challenge. One is, as Adventist communities, campuses, we try to make sure that there is something available for everybody, right? So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of opportunity. And sometimes, on the other side of it, as a student, you feel, I need to go to this, I've got to go to that, I've got to go to that. And it becomes a tick box experience rather than an engagement experience. I think the opportunities for engagement are definitely there. I think some professors do it very, very well about setting up an experience in a classroom environment. And I think the chaplains try to do too, where it can be very real. I think the other challenge, while I'm thinking about challenges, is that I think sometimes if you're in an Adventist community, whether it's a church or an institution, there is something about you that says, I have to be seen to be good. And if we're not careful, that can take away authenticity. And for people to feel it's absolutely okay to ask this question. or to say, right now I'm doubting. So I would say that for anyone who is in an institution, leadership or student or whatever, to try and it's almost a conscious decision to try and form an environment where that can actually take place. Because the saddest thing in the world for me is when I mean, there's lots of great stories about students who leave an Adventist university and campus and that feel their experience of God has grown and they can talk about that's great. But there are also some that leave feeling shallow. And I think somehow we need to do better at helping people feel that it's okay, that we should be a safe space for people to not be sure of something for a while. So I was, when I was at Newport College as a principal, I remember doing a Vespers one night, and I was talking about loss and some experiences I'd had where I had to struggle to find God's voice, right? Anyway, so I was talking about this, and then I said at the end, when God is silent, that is not the time to give up. That's the time to push back to God even more. Now, I don't know what it was. That was towards the end of what I said. When I finished speaking, it's the only time I ever remember this happening. The whole of the group and church was a small campus but full. Everyone just sat there quietly. And I realized that I had hit where more people were than I realized when I said it. And that was a wake-up call to me and I don't know that I've done well with it after that, but it certainly was an awakening to the fact that there was a lot more people sensing God's silence, sensing they don't have their answers, having questions right in front of us than we would like to imagine, and not feeling they can talk about it. So I do think that's a challenge, and I think it's a challenge we need to keep working on. And I have worked over the years with some wonderful chaplains and student life people who get that, who try and find those moments, and teachers, but it's difficult.
Yeah. That was a big thing you said. I, as a student, value, and so many other students too, I think the biggest value, especially in my generation, I can't speak for other generations, but it's the value of authenticity.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing that's most effective is when they hear and when there's a space that people are honest and they talk about what's really true and what they feel in their heart, rather than just focusing on creating this beautiful sermon that doesn't really apply to people. So I think that's a big thing. And why your talk about, I can't remember what the quote you said was. It was something about, pushing God further back when you feel like he's silent. Can we dive deeper into that? How? Because for me, from people that I've talked to, it hasn't really been encouraged too much to push back on God. It's kind of just been like, that's not true faith if you're pushing back.
Yeah. So you look at the Psalms again.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, David did not, and the other psalmists as well, they did not sit silent if they felt they couldn't understand what God was doing or what was happening in their lives or couldn't recognize where God was. They would just let him have it. I think, and you read the book of Job, same thing. So as I read Job, there's this kind of conflict. On one hand, he doesn't see God, he sees God being silent because all these negative things are happening. There doesn't seem to be any response from God, but yet he's confident in who God is, right? And I think it's when you have those two together, maybe, that's when it's easiest to push back. Because if you can say to yourself, but I've seen this in my own life before. I've seen God be like this. I've seen it. I'm sure this is who God is. But yeah, there's all these things right now that counter that. But I can't forget this piece. So God, come, speak to me. Yeah. Right? My experience, at least, is that when you do that, it may take a time, but I think God speaks back to you. And I think sometimes it's because when we're in this dark place, we're not calm enough to be able to hear God's voice. You know, one of my favorite Bible stories is Elijah. And, Elijah, here he's had all these successes. And all of a sudden, Jezebel threatens him. He's petrified, he runs for his life, and he wishes he was dead. Right? And is he burnt out? Is he, who knows? But why? But he loses it, right? He loses confidence, and he doesn't know where God is. And God's response is really interesting. First of all, he feeds him, doesn't say a word to him for 3 days. Feeds him, lets him sleep, feeds him, lets him sleep. Is kind to himself. And I think sometimes we're in this kind of state, we need to be kind to ourselves. And recognize that our pain and our loss and whatever is causing us to feel God being absent is real. And it's okay. And we need to be looked after, including look after ourselves. Then he lets him walk. And then when he eventually speaks to Elijah, he says, Elijah, what are you doing here? Elijah rails. He says, I'm the only one here. Basically, you've left me alone. I'm isolated. No one else is around. And then God very gently says, well, actually, nah. and then they have a conversation and Elijah moves on. But I think that's a wonderful example of someone who's in this place of despair, not seeing a way through, and time, calmness. Because when God speaks, he speaks in a still small voice. Not the thunder, nothing else. Just be calm. Now let's just wait for God. And that may seem easy to say and hard to do, and it is. It's easy to say and hard to do. But I do think that that is I do think God honors that.
Yeah. That's awesome. What's, in your experience you've seen lots of young people through the years, you've worked with them, you've seen them even from different locations and countries. What's one piece of advice that you could give to them if you could?
One piece of advice.
Yes. You can make it 2, 3.
Well, I would say what I started with is if it was one piece, I would just say, know you're loved by God. If it was one piece. Then I would say, and God has given you such possibilities. Find them, explore them, and live them to the fullest. That's kind of what I would say.
Is that something that you wish you heard more when you were growing up?
Some people treated me that way, but nobody actually ever said that to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
I would say that's true.
I'm just curious. I don't know if this is true, if there's any studies behind it, but I wonder if the advice that people give is the advice that they wish that they heard more. So that's why I asked that.
I think that's probably true,
Yeah.
because I think sometimes the advice you give is what you have learned to value over time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anybody ever countered what I just said, but I do think that I like, and I think this is true of many Adventists particularly, or people from strong traditional faith backgrounds. I think often we don't think we're good enough. And because somehow we have this ideal of what we should be, and we're not that. And so, are we good enough? And I think that both racks us with feelings of guilt or inadequacy, but it also can put a cap on our finding what we really can be.
Mm-hmm. I think you are living testimony that we can do anything and that we can and should walk through these doors, even though we might feel like we're not good enough. That doesn't exist. So I appreciate all your stories and your words of wisdom. And
It's my pleasure. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
I'm so glad. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this episode and you want to support this podcast, please like, subscribe so you know when there are more episodes, and comment so we know what you think. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.